Mountain. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Good morning, Wall Street. Well, this week it's the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing on the moon. So this gave us the idea to take a look at the Aerospace and Defense Industry Group. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the group on a relative strength basis. And we might occasionally throw a seasonality chart in looking at the individual stocks within the group. Now, the Aerospace Industry Group is part of the capital goods sector. And what you see here is a table of the 24 sectors that we look at, ranked from best to worst, and the ranking is as of yesterday's trading. The capital goods group is about middle of the pack, sector ranking of 9, which has actually improved over recent weeks. If we just go back a little bit in time here, the sector rank of 9 is the best that we've seen since early June. Kind of been wallowing around in the middle to lower echelons of our sector rankings. Within the capital goods sector, let's take a focus on aerospace. Now, aerospace that we see here has a group ranking of 111, and that's out of 153 industry groups. So what this tells us is that aerospace is not a leading area of the market at this time. So let's take a look at some individual stocks. We're going to look at the largest cap-weighted aerospace stocks, and topping the list in terms of market cap is United Technologies. Now, United Technologies, relative to the S&P, has done reasonably well on a monthly basis. The relative strength line is a fairly steady move higher, and that's a positive. Relative to the sector and the industry group, the aerospace industry group seems to be fairly flat recently. Moving on to Boeing. Boeing has underperformed the sector and the aerospace industry group. They have been doing pretty well relative to the S&P up until about 2007, but when the market turned south in 2007, Boeing could not hold up relative to the S&P and has been underperforming on a monthly basis ever since. Looking at a daily chart of Boeing, we see the seasonality chart here, and from March to June, the seasonality was fairly positive, with starting out with very strong seasonal heat. And it does have a cycle R of 0.68, which means that the seasonal cycle is a very valid one. The 2009 cycle R is 0.54, which means it's done a fairly good job this year of following its seasonal cycle. Middle part of this year, the seasonal cycle turned negative, with a fair amount of negative seasonal heat here. And that seasonal cycle is negative well into October. So it may be a little bit of tough flying for Boeing going forward for the next few months. Lockheed Martin, this is another major aerospace company. On a monthly basis, the relative strength had been pretty good against the S&P, and it had been doing fairly well relative to its sector and industry group. But we see recently that the relative strength lines are coming down here and starting to deteriorate. And if we focus up on that a little bit, we can see a clear break on these relative strength lines. We see that the relative strength on a monthly basis for Honeywell are clearly in the negative. Let's go to General Dynamics. Again, a similar story. And looking at the relative strength lines on a monthly basis gives us a big picture situation. For those that don't like to trade very frequently, looking at relative strength on a weekly or monthly basis, it can be a good guide as to which securities are worth holding on to for the long term and which may not. And right now, we're not getting positive indications in terms of the big picture for most of these stocks. Now, Raytheon, a similar situation. It's still holding up relative to the S&P, but as you can see by the monthly chart, the group and sector relative strength lines are not very strong. we're not seeing a lot to sink our teeth into at the moment here from a longer term point of view. Rockwell Collins, L3 Communications, all of these large cap aerospace companies just don't seem to be providing major leadership on a big picture basis. But some of the smaller cap stocks do show some promise. This is American Science and Engineering, and that has been relatively quiet of late, but you can see that the big picture relative strength lines are looking pretty good. In the middle part of 2008, the relative strength lines clearly went positive. The price action was very strong relative to the market, so you have a positive big picture situation for a stock like this. Now let's go to the seasonality chart and see if there's anything interesting there. Well, the interesting thing about this company over 15 years, the cycle R is 0.83, which is a very valid seasonal cycle. The cycle has been fairly flat so far this year. Going forward a little bit, you can see that there is one phase throughout the entire year that seems to be very positive for the stock, and that's during the August and September period, which is ironic considering that that's usually a weak period for the market as a whole. So this will be an interesting stock to follow. The setup is very nice. As we said, the big picture is positive, and we have a strong seasonal period moving forward. It's simply a question of whether the stock can trigger us into a good trade here on a shorter term basis. So just a few ideas thinking about the aerospace industry as we reflect the major events of 40 years ago. Hope that helps. See you next time.